Hi there. It's been a while. In case you forgot, my name is Jack, and I like to quote-unquote fix Pokemon that I believe to be forgotten or underused and give them a little bit of love to make them more viable, because that's what I find fun. But there is a Pokemon. You all know it. A Pokemon considered by many to be unsalvageable. The Pokemon that probably comes to mind when you think of a weak, pathetic, deplorable Pokemon. A Pokemon so worthless in combat that I believe it to be the worst non-gimmick Pokemon of all time. Today we're going to be talking about Ledian, the 5-star Pokemon. 5 stars? That's a good one. Will you be here all week? Now, worst non-gimmick Pokemon isn't a title I take lightly. Believe me, there are a lot of stinkers out there, but I can put an asterisk on pretty much all of them. Delcatty is pretty bad, but hey, maybe you can evolve it early with a Moonstone, and anything that can use Stab Return isn't completely irredeemable. Onix is pretty bad too, but at least it evolves in Gen 2 onward. Sunflora is abysmal, and we'll get to her too, but it's mostly abysmal because it's a grass type in the Johto region. In other games like Black and White 2, it's actually on the cusp of acceptable. Luvdisc is pretty worthless, but I'll always give it props for its water typing and the fact that it's used as a tool to farm heart scales, so I can at least give it a reason to exist. Even other early game bugs like Kricketune or Wormadam at least have a power spike at some point in their respective games, or were given a busted move in a later gen like Quiverdance or Sticky Web. Even gimmick Pokemon technically have the excuse of being a gimmick, and while I do have a bit of a bone to pick with the concept of a gimmick Pokemon, you can kind of understand that Pokemon like Unknown and Smeargle weren't really supposed to be used in-game. Ledian, on the contrary, has pretty much nothing going for it. Where do I even start? Well, Bug Flying is one of the worst dual typings I can think of. Now there are a plethora of bug flyers out there, so a couple of them have managed to be decent, but Scyther and Butterfree are the exception, not the norm. We've got 5 weaknesses, including a quad weakness to Rock. This isn't competitive, so we're not losing half of our health to Stealth Rock upon switch-in, but that's still a lot of pretty common types like Flying and Fire. And immunity to Ground might sound nice, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a Ground type that isn't also packing a Rock move as well. And our resistances are types that a lot of Pokemon can probably deal with anyway, like Grass and Bug, which both have 5 weaknesses on their own. No one's probably ever said, wow, this Ledian sure plugs a lot of gaps in my team. But our typing is probably the least of our worries. Our main obstacle in this video is undoubtedly our stat spread. Look at this. I hope you weren't eating while watching this video, because this is absolutely disgusting. A base stat total of 390 in itself is not the main issue. We've dealt with worse, but the distribution is the real kicker. I'll start with the positives in our special defense of 110. Special defense would probably be my last choice for a stat to specialize in, but at this point, I'll take what I can get. 110 is a high number. A speed stat of 85 is also good enough for an in-game playthrough, so Ledian will probably outspeed the opponent. But to quote a certain cheese-related YouTuber, we're fast, so we go first. And then what? Well, we're not doing damage, I'll tell you that for free. You will need a magnifying glass to see this attack stat of a microscopic 35. But don't hold it too close, Ledian is a bug after all. 35 is basically non-existent. I'll remind you that both Bug and Flying were physical types in Gen 2, so this is the stat you are going to use for stab damage in those games. Not that it matters, because Ledian doesn't even learn a stab move until Generation 4, and even still, it's not till level 29. That is just plain cruel. But maybe with a physical special split, we can use our special attack? Well, it's technically better, but still unacceptable. 55 is still doing no damage, pretty much counting this Pokemon out as any type of attacker. Okay, that's fine. Well, it's not fine, but not all Pokemon need to be offensive. But unfortunately, our HP and defense stats are also terrible, basically negating our one good stat in special defense. You'd think that this abysmal stat total might get buffed in a later gen like Delcatty did, even if it's just a minor change. But unfortunately, Ledian didn't make the cut even for that, despite being in desperate need of it. I guess plus 20 special attack on Swellow just had to come first. Hell, even our version exclusive counterpart Ariados got plus 10 to special defense just for one more little twist of the knife. Ledian's stat spread is kind of a mirrored but less min-maxed version of Onyx, who we covered last video. Onyx specializes in physical defense, but like Ledian, has almost no HP. But Onyx at least shines in the early game because he hard counters the physical attacking Pokemon that appear early on like Normal, Flying, and Bug. Most early game Pokemon will be physical attackers who use Tackle and not much else. Onyx isn't good either, but being the king of the early game is still something. He may have peaked in high school, but at least he peaked, you know? Ledian, on the contrary, can't even do this. Despite also being available early, he cannot take a physical attack to save his life, and is still unevolved until level 18, when the early game is pretty well over and the difficulty will start to ramp up. Now I want to pause for a sec and talk about the early game bug archetype. The bug type in early gens was used as a bit of a teaching tool, introducing new players to the concept that some Pokemon will not be strong forever and may fall off in power down the road. This is an interesting idea, and I'll use it as an opportunity to reiterate that some Pokemon have a reason to be weak. If the game uses mechanics to back up a Pokemon's lack in strength, I can be more understanding of it. Butterfree, I think, is the gold standard of this. It's fully evolved by level 10, which is before the first gym in pretty much any game, so it'll probably be your strongest team member early on, maybe even stronger than your starter. But by the late game, its stats will inevitably fall off, and you would struggle sending it into battle against the Pokemon League. All that Butterfree can really do in the late game is use accurate Spore moves with its Compound Eyes ability, which gives it a better niche as a catching Pokemon. And I'm saying all this in defense of Butterfree. It might be an odd niche, but that's still something, and it makes Butterfree a solid option as a team member, even if it's only a temporary one. Butterfree becomes, probably, the best catching Pokemon in the game. It's okay that our stats fall off later because we still have other uses. The problem is, this archetype incorrectly implies that Ledian was ever viable to begin with. Despite being an early game bug, there is no significant power spike with this Pokemon line in any game at any point. Ladybug has to wait 8 levels longer than Caterpie, 2 whole badges in HeartGold SoulSilver, to fully evolve, and even still, it will always do less damage and take more than Butterfree. Not to mention that Ladybug is an absolute burden to train up to that point as well. You would be relying on Comet Punch and Mach Punch up to that point, both of which are fairly weak moves that we don't get stabbed from, and use our useless attack stat. So the only lesson a new player learns by choosing to use Ledian is never to use Ledian again. And I honestly feel bad, because I think a lot of us as kids might have thought that Ladybug and Ledian looked cool and wanted to use them, and many of us were tricked, manipulated into catching one, solely because of its cool design. Even if you don't like bugs, you might like ladybugs. They're not as creepy and gross as a lot of their brethren, and one could mistake this line as a bug type for the rest of us. For those who don't really like the creepy crawlies all too much, but might also be itching to take the bug type for a spin. And if that were you, you would be getting a terrible first impression. For this reason, Ledian's cool design is almost a point against it. Wormadam is also hot garbage, but at least you can tell by looking at it. The way Game Freak handled Ledian was cruel and manipulative. It's a shame when you fall in love with a Pokemon's design, but its worthlessness in battle makes you abandon it. Okay, I'm obviously exaggerating a bit, but I do actually like Ledian. I think it's cool, and I wish it didn't suck, but it clearly has a lot working against it. Everything we've covered so far has been pretty undeniable issues that you probably were aware of already, but I truly believe that there is a lot of missed potential with this Pokemon line. Take, for example, our moveset. There are some pretty fun moves here like Mach Punch, and a lot of support moves too, which aren't objectively bad, but there's really no direction here. Some might argue that Ledian isn't supposed to be an attacker, but instead a support Pokemon who sets up things like screens which have the damage for the entire party, learning both Reflect and Light Screen naturally at level 14. But pretty much any Pokemon can learn screens via TM anyway, which are available in infinite supply as early as the Goldenrod City department store. I wouldn't say Ledian is supposed to be a support Pokemon, it's just the only thing he can almost do. But this is by no means a niche for Ledian. We set up screens because we can't really do anything else, and tons of Pokemon can do it better. To put it bluntly, we're trying to be both an attacker and a support Pokemon, and failing miserably at both. And it's this lack of direction that's made me sit on this video for so long. In general, you don't get very far in Pokemon by trying to play multiple roles in a game with only 4 move slots. I just couldn't figure out exactly what I think Ledian should be, attacker or support. But then it hit me. Ledian is an early game bug type, and that archetype allows us to switch roles as the game progresses. Ledian might be a powerhouse attacker in the early game once it evolves, but its stats will inevitably fall off, so Ledian would have more use as a support Pokemon later on, but it can be both at different points in the game. An early game bug might fall off stat-wise, but like Butterfree, it doesn't need to be useless for the rest of the game. And that's what I want to do with Ledian today. Let's take another look at our design. Ledian is based on another one of Game Freak's lesser-known series, Pulseman. Now, I've never actually played Pulseman, but I did watch a 6-minute YouTube video on it. This inspiration is what gives Ledian its humanoid form and allows it to learn a lot of punching moves like Comet Punch and Mach Punch. Now, Game Freak didn't design this Pokemon to be a one-to-one translation. If they did, it'd probably be Bug Electric type, so I'm not going to treat it as one either. But it does give this Pokemon a lot of character, and that's exactly what we're looking for. I'm no expert on Pulseman, but this little action hero aesthetic is a good start. I just think Game Freak needed to lean into it a little further to put Ledian on the map, because the Pokédex doesn't really back this up all too much. Hell, it hardly gives us anything to go off of at all, and in fact, it kinda contradicts everything Ledian stands for. Despite the Dex talking non-stop about our random association with the stars, you'd think Ledian's dots would be star-shaped or arranged in a star pattern or something. It talks about how we glow and fly around the night sky, but despite this, Ladybug and Ledian can only be found in the morning or daytime. So I'm going to take the Pokédex with a grain of salt here and choose to lean more into the design and superhero-based inspiration rather than the Dex. But personally, I don't think Ledian really fits as a superhero, but more of a sidekick. Think about it. He's plucky, he's weak, he's got that underdog energy that we absolutely love in this series. If the big guns like Heracross and Caesar are Captain America and Iron Man, then Ledian is Don Cheadle in Space Jam 2. Ledian will never pack the same punch as the big gun bug types, but that doesn't mean we can't be useful. We're weak, and we always will be, but we can still help out the team in some way. That's the vibe I want to run with. To show you what I mean, let's take a look at our abilities first. Swarm fits perfectly with what I'm going for, powering up bug-type moves in a pinch. A true hero wouldn't give up in the face of adversity and might pack a slightly harder punch when the going gets tough. And Early Bird kinda makes sense too, but we're gonna need to do better. I get that Ledian would have to get up earlier because it's so weak that it has to work harder than everyone else, but we're gonna need more than that to help us pack more of a punch, which we so desperately need. Now the logical choice here would be Iron Fist, as we have such strong homage to fighting and punching moves with our fists, but that is already our hidden ability. I know those don't exist in Gen 4, but I don't love leaving a hole in the hidden ability slot. And honestly, I think we'll need more than a 20% boost with an attack stat so low. So I've opted to go with an ability that should help us hit a little bit harder. An ability that, like Ledian, is all about making the little things count. Technician. Borrowing from our big brother Scyther, this ability gives a 50% boost to all moves below 60 base power, which we learn a lot of. I think that this ability is perfect for Ledian. He'll never have the raw strength, but he's practiced the fundamentals so hard that he's nearly perfected them and can now execute them near perfectly. This will hopefully give us the power boost we need in the early game, regardless of whether or not our moves are physical or special, a much more widely applicable ability than Iron Fist. Our movesets via Level Up and TM are chock full of moves at or below 60 base power, like Aerial Ace, Silver Wind, and Giga Drain, exclusively 60 base power in Gen 4 by the way, so I'm excited to see just how much mileage we get from this one change. Next, I think we need to take a look at our typing. Bug flying, as previously mentioned, is terrible, and I don't think Ledian needs to be married to it. We are a bug, there's no getting around that, and we do fly as well, but there are plenty of Pokemon who do canonically fly and are not the flying type. Hell, even some Pokemon that cannot fly are the flying type. I don't really know why this is, but what I do know is that I can't stand a flying type that can't learn the move Fly, so I'm getting rid of it. I think as Ladybug, I want to leave us as a pure bug type, but upon evolving, I want to make us bug fighting. I think it's a good fit due to all the punching moves that we learn already, and also has a sort of association with justice, hence why it's super effective against Dark, the evil type. So I think the fighting type is a perfect fit for a pseudo superhero like Ledian. Holding this typing back until we evolve might give us a fighting chance against Faulkner since we won't be quad weak to flying yet. And we will be one out of only 3 fighting types available prior to the 3rd gym leader, Whitney. And Ledian is definitely the most common out of the 3, so that definitely gives us some value. I'm also hoping that this new type, in combination with our new ability, gives us some decent damage with fun moves like Stab Drain Punch via TM. I have no idea whether or not this change will be for the better or for worse, given the fact that the champion of this game is a glorified bird keeper, but what we had before was not working, and I'm excited to see how this will shake things up for us. Lastly, let's take a look at our level up moveset. Now remember, I am essentially cramming 2 roles into a single move pool, so it might get a little crammed with the leveling, especially since the Johto level curve is extremely low. But it's Ledian, cut me some slack. We still need a lot of changes because like I said, Ledian currently fails as both an attacker and a support mon, so we've really got our work cut out for us. I want to draw attention to the fact that we learned Baton Pass at level 24. Ledian is actually one of the earliest users of Baton Pass in the game. The problem is that there's pretty much no synergy with this move in our existing learn set. Baton Pass is never an optimal strategy in-game, but it's a good character move for a sidekick Pokemon, and there are a lot of things that can be done with this move that many people might not know about. Like I glossed over earlier, Baton Pass is a move that can switch out into a party Pokemon and also carry on any stat buffs and substitutes. But that's like Baton Pass 101. We'll dive into the specifics in a little bit, but this is the main support role I'm going to try to build Ledian around. With that said, I'll start us off with a classic Zen mode maneuver and swap out Tackle at level 1 for Pound. I just think it makes a little bit more sense for a punching Pokemon, and it's slightly more powerful and won't miss. But I'm also going to sneak in another move at level 1 in Focus Energy. When dealing with an opponent above its power level, so most Pokemon, I imagine Ladybug would need to psych itself up for those battles. So it's a good character pick, but this is also our first instance of a move that can be baton passed. With this combo, Ledian can pump not only himself, but he can also pump his entire team, which might synergize well with Pokemon that have a lot of high crit moves. Next, I'll bring down Comet Punch from level 9 to level 3. It's a bad move, arguably worse than Pound, but appropriate. I'm just making room for better moves later on. For example, we learned Supersonic at level 6. That's not the example, Supersonic is also terrible, but I'm going to replace it with Sonic Boom, which does 20 flat damage to the opponent. So basically, it's a move that isn't hindered by our god-awful attack stats and allows us to do some actual damage no matter what. I'm really not sure why we learned Supersonic, but I feel like Sonic Boom fits just as well. It's pretty early to learn before the first gym, but Pokemon like Voltorb and Magnemite both learn this very early as well, and I don't think that 20 flat damage is enough to be game-breaking like Dragon Rage can be, which does 40 damage. Pokemon like Mareep and Geodude are still going to do more than 20 damage to Falkner with their super effective moves. At level 9, we've got a hole that was originally filled by Comet Punch, and I'm going to fill it with a priority move, Vacuum Wave. Now, usually, we learn Mach Punch early on, and this is basically the special-based version of that, while still being a punching move. I'll remind you that our special attack is higher than our physical one, so this will do more damage on average. The description of Vacuum Wave is kind of weird, and it's described as sending a wave of pure vacuum at the opponent. To me, I read this as using a punch in combination with the air, and Ladybug does still have wings to flap wind, so in a way, I do kind of like this move better than Mach Punch. At level 12, I'm going to squeeze in Bug Bite for our first stab move. Ledian is a bug, but not a gross bug, so I want to stay away from more vulgar bug type moves like Leech Life and Twin Needle, but I feel like Bug Bite is harmless enough. It'll still be resisted by the first 2 gyms, but Technician boosted Bug Bite will probably be our bread and butter for a long time, and the secondary effect of eating the opponent's held berry will probably come in handy given that gym leaders will always have a citrus berry on their ace Pokemon. Next, we usually learn 3 moves at level 14, Reflect, Light Screen, and Safeguard. I'll keep the screens, I guess, because they're kind of iconic for the Ledian line, but I don't feel the same about Safeguard. I want to replace this with Mind Reader instead, a move that guarantees that the next move will hit, despite any changes to accuracy. Now this isn't really useful for Ledian in particular, but this is a move that can also be baton passed, so it should combo well with some Pokemon that can't afford to miss. My thinking with this move is that since the Ledian line gets absolutely dwarfed in terms of raw strength, it has to be one step ahead of the opponent and needs to rely on moves like Mind Reader to dodge heavy attacks. I went with this over moves like Lock On, which effectively do the same thing because many fighting types can also learn Mind Reader like Hitmonlee, Breloom, and Medicham. Another thing I want to do at this point is pull our evolution down 1 level from 18 to 17 so we can evolve around Bugsy's level cap. Now his ace is a flying type Pokemon, which we would now be quad weak to, but he doesn't actually have a flying type move, so the stat boost is an absolute positive. And like I said, we need to have a power spike at some point, and evolving Ledian earlier really helps. Now, Ledian is a version exclusive Pokemon and is considered to be a counterpart to Ariados. So I did check on when Ariados evolves, as I would feel worse about this change if he evolved at the same level, but Spinarak doesn't evolve until level 22 anyway, so I feel like there's no issue changing Ledian's evolution. As soon as we evolve at level 17, we usually learn Mach Punch, but since we already brought in Vacuum Wave, I don't see the need for it anymore. Since we evolve at this level now, I'm going to use this as an excuse to learn Aerial Ace. Now we're not a flying type anymore, but we do still fly around, and this is as apt a time as any to learn a flying move right before the bug type gym. This is also another 60 base power move that gets a Technician boost. We can learn it by TM, but this is the point in the game where we should be peaking, and countering the second gym is a good way to help us with that. At level 20, I want to add the move Beat Up. It might seem a little below the belt for a heroic Pokemon, but I'm reading it more as the rest of the squad helping us out when we're backed into a corner. We're part of a team, and we're using that to our advantage, and this is the right time to learn it given that the next gym is a Ghost type. Incidentally, I'm pretty sure this move does get powered up by Technician, but only for Ledian's attack, not for the rest of our team. At level 24, we'll learn Baton Pass like normal. I feel like this is the right time to learn it, as it's around here that our stats are going to start to fall off, and we'll start to transition from an attacker to a support Pokemon. But I will still learn Silver Wind and pull it down from 29 to 27. Just a solid bug type move that uses our better attacking stat and gets the Technician boost. But we're going to need to squeeze in some moves later on. After that, at level 31, I want to learn Bulk Up. I don't love slapping these stat boosting moves on our Pokemon every time, but I want to meet in the middle and get rid of Swords Dance via TM, which I think makes less sense. Ledian doesn't have swords, fangs, or anything sharp going on really, so I never got why we learned this move, despite it being the only thing that can patch up our awful attack stat, until now. Bulk Up, on the other hand, patches up our low attack and defense. I think in the face of adversity, Ledian would need to physically get bigger to be able to go toe-to-toe with the opponent. Plus, I don't really intend for Ledian to use this move, but to baton pass it to the rest of our team. This is what baton pass is mainly used for, and it would be a shame not to include some stat boosting move when trying to build around it. After that, I'm going to pull down Swift from level 41 to 34. We haven't really touched our connection to the stars thus far, so I don't want to get rid of it. Plus, it's now buffed by Technician, so it might be kinda nice to have despite learning it so late. And I'll push Agility back one level to level 37 to space things out. But again, there are a lot of Pokemon that would love to move twice as fast, so this is even more synergy with Baton Pass. Next, at level 41, we've got a hole that used to be filled by Swift, and I want to fill it with a pretty interesting move that I'm really excited about, Power Trick, a move that swaps the user's raw attack and defense stat. Now to be clear, this doesn't swap stat changes, so if we boosted our attack with Swords Dance to +2 and used Power Trick, that doesn't mean our defense is now at +2. So swapping Bulk Up earlier gives us a nice balance no matter what. If our raw attack is 80 and our defense is 40, using Power Trick would mean that our attack is now 40 and our defense is 80. This move is most famous for being able to turn Shuckle, one of the most defensive Pokemon in the game, into an absolute glass cannon. Now all of that is pretty much moot, as Ledian's attack and defense are equally terrible, so this move is pretty much useless for us. Except for the fact that the effects of Power Trick can also be baton passed. To be clear, we're not passing on Ledian's garbage-based stats to another teammate, because that would suck. The incoming party member will have their base attack and their base defense swapped, and they won't have to waste a turn to do it. So basically, it's a lot of words to say that any defensive Pokemon can become an offensive monster, and I think that's really fun. I feel like this has so much potential, especially since Power Trick is such an exclusive move. There is currently no Pokemon in the Johto Dex that can learn both Power Trick and Baton Pass, which opens up an incredible niche even if our stats have fallen off. Now there's just one issue. Does this move make sense? Well, I think so. A couple fighting types like Machop and Medicham can learn this too, and since Ledian is so outmatched by its opponents, to me, it makes sense that it would have to use some cheeky tactics like this to gain the upper hand and turn the tables on the opponent. It fits better on a Psychic-type Pokemon, but if we can already learn Screens and Safeguard naturally, I think that this makes just as much sense as those moves. Like, I don't think Shuckle has a narrative reason to learn this move either. I think Game Freak really just wanted to try something fun with some interesting mechanics, so why can't Ledian do that too? I would have loved to give this move to us earlier in the game, but most Pokemon learn it pretty late as it can be pretty busted if used correctly. The earliest level that a Pokemon gets this move in Gen 4 is Claydol at level 31, so 41 for Ledian sounds fair. I think it's going to be nice to have it for the final gym fight. Next, I'll shove in Wish at level 44. This move doesn't need to be baton passed. You can just switch out and heal the incoming party member by half of Ledian's health, but I'm mainly including it to play into our connection to the stars. I don't think this will be very good, since Ledian doesn't have a lot of HP, but you never know. The stars are well known for their healing abilities.
That doesn't sound right, but I don't know enough about stars to dispute it. No, it's right.
Our last two moves are Double Edge and Bug Buzz at 48 and 53 respectively. Bug Buzz is fine, but I'd like to give us Sky Uppercut instead of Double Edge at level 48. Moves like Drain Punch will do more damage with Technician anyway, but I kinda like it as an ultimate fighting stab move since we can actually fly and punch, and it's still an alright move even if your Ledian has Swarm instead. And that's it. Those are all the changes I'm making to our moveset. Now some of you might think that something is missing. With all of the punching moves we've already got going on, I did consider adding the elemental punches as relearn moves at level 1, but ultimately I decided against it. Not every Pokemon with arms needs to get these. If I wanted to give us the elemental punches, I would have played Gen 2 where they're available via TM. We could probably sweep lands with Bulk Up plus Ice and Thunder Punch, and while that would be funny, an early game bug type shouldn't be able to sweep the champion. If every Pokemon in the game is capable of beating the champion, then they shouldn't be the champion in the first place. Preparing for late game sweeps kinda goes against everything I've said thus far, so I'm gonna keep our set the way it is, and I'm hoping it's enough. With all that out of the way, it's time to let Ledian fly. As usual, I'll be using a full party of Pokemon to complement Ledian. I will not be using items from the bag in battle, only held items, and I will be playing on set mode. Alright Ledian, let's see what you got. So to start off, I choose Totodile as my starter, but just like last video, I won't be using him on our team. Totodile fans, your day will come, but using Ledian is going to require a cracked team of Pokemon with a specific set of skills, and unfortunately, none of the Johto starters really fit the bill. After that, on Route 30, we catch our ladybug. I name her Starlight. Not a sidekick, but a star-themed superhero all the same. She's a pure bug type now, not bug flying, but I don't think it's going to make much of a difference early on anyway. We have a timid nature, and I don't know how to feel about it. It'll probably hurt us in the early game, but we might appreciate the extra speed in the late game so we can get off our support moves before getting hit. We have 3 new moves in Pound and Comet Punch, both of which are boosted by our new ability Technician, and Focus Energy, which might play well with our multi-hit moves. It'll be interesting to see how drastic the changes are going to be right out of the gate. So I've never actually played SoulSilver before this. I always had HeartGold growing up, so I've never seen Ladybug's overworld sprite. Look how cool this is. Despite their shortcomings, these Pokemon have great designs. And I love using Pokemon that I've never used before in HGSS specifically because I'm so in love with the following sprites. They brought it back in newer games, but it's never quite been able to top this in my opinion. Oh, right, we actually have to use this thing in battle. Well, I can say that adding Sonic Boom fully remedies the chore that is raising a ladybug. We can two-shot pretty much anything at this point. Seriously, look how much Pound does, and then look at Sonic Boom. We would be doing no type of damage without it. That alone is a huge improvement. We're not a complete waste of space right off the get-go. Time to face Falkner and his flying types though. He leads with Pidgey, who we outspeed and hit with a Sonic Boom for most of its health while he goes for Tackle. But we can finish it off with a Vacuum Wave. In comes Pidgeotto, and shockingly, Ladybug outspeeds this thing with a timid nature and gets a Sonic Boom off for about half its health before we get hit by a Gust. But one more Sonic Boom is exactly enough to take it down. That's right, this Pidgeotto has exactly 40 HP. I could not have scripted this any better. How many of you thought Ladybug would be able to solo the Flying Gym? Nice job. But that was just the first gym. To see Ladybug through to the end, it's about time we start assembling that crack team of Pokemon that I hinted at earlier. On Route 32, I stop at the Pokemon Center to pick up an old rod from this fisherman, and then I backtrack to Cherry Grove City and start fishing. Soon enough, we wrangle up a new team member, X the Krabby. Short for Executor of the Damned, X is a Pokemon who just likes to chop off heads. Is that really so against the law? X and his Krabby brethren are best known as the earliest Pokemon in the game to learn a one-hit KO move in Guillotine at the right level of 31. X's life of murder has caused him to develop a pretty quiet nature. Any friend he's ever tried to make has always ended up getting their head chopped off for one reason or another, so the battlefield has always been where he truly shines. X doesn't ask questions. Just point at the head you need him to cut off and he'll do his job. And it's that kind of dedication that has earned him Employee of the Month at the Cherry Grove Butcher 17 months in a row. With a resume like that, how could I possibly turn down his application to join the team? Good sir, welcome to the squad. But we're not even done there, because when trekking through Union Cave, we meet Precious the Onyx. Despite her misleading nickname, Precious is the toughest son of a gun on this side of Tojo Falls with a colossal defense stat of 160. Or at least she was, because recently, many young and upcoming Onyx have put her out of a job with their fancy new Steel-type evolution, Steelix. Dug in with her old ways, poor Precious doesn't stand a chance against this younger, stronger Steel-type. As a result, She hasn't been able to hold her ground in the ring anymore and hasn't been able to hold a steady job for years. Her story is a sad one, but I still see a lot of potential in this old bird. Sure, she's no spring chicken, but she's got experience for days. Precious is a Pokemon with a chip on her shoulder, and we're going to use that to our advantage. Her best days are definitely behind her, but Precious is determined to show that she's still got a lot to offer. This team needs a Pokemon with a little backbone to hold us together, and we're hoping that this old soul is the Pokemon for the job. Precious, welcome to the team. After that, Starlight reaches level 17, which allows her to evolve into Ledian at Bugsy's level cap. Once evolved, we also learn Aerial Ace. We don't get stabbed from it anymore, since we're now bug fighting, but it is still Technician boosted and should still come in handy for the upcoming gym. Speaking of, time for Bugsy, who leads with Big Brother Scyther, and I lead with our newly evolved Ledian. On turn 1, we both go for Focus Energy. Then, I go for a super effective Technician boosted Aerial Ace. And good God, that did nothing. Scyther, meanwhile, goes for a Leer and outspeeds us with a quick attack next turn. Sadly, it looks like Starlight is just outmatched. Until Starlight finds the Focus Energy crit to take Scyther down. Ledian, I love the energy. You may not have the base stats, but goddamn do you ever have the charisma. Aerial Ace is enough to sweep the rest of his team, marking Ledian as the best bug type in the game. In all seriousness, I've been a little bit underwhelmed by her physical attack, and the timid nature probably isn't helping. I didn't think we'd be falling off quite this early, but that still was a pretty solid fight. Another great win. Luckily, the ensuing Revel fight goes pretty smoothly. He leads with Ghastly, who's physically frail, so even Ledian can two-shot it with Aerial Ace. In comes Bayleaf, who sets up a Reflect, and I go for Focus Energy. We don't quad resist grass moves anymore, so Razor Leaf still does a decent amount, even from a defensive Pokemon like Bayleaf. It's enough to get us by for now, but these are the stats we're going to be stuck with until the Pokemon League. I'm starting to wonder if we gave Ledian enough firepower to last until the late game. Regardless, we do eventually crit to hit through Reflect and take Bayleaf down, and last is Zubat. We are quad weak to flying, but he doesn't know a flying type move yet, so a couple more Aerial Aces take it down. I'll take the wins in the early game where we can get them, but I can definitely see the warning signs. The third gym is a huge difficulty spike. Will Ledian have enough? Well, only one way to find out. Whitney leads with Clefairy and I lead Ledian. I figure that I might as well get off a Focus Energy before the real threat comes in, and it pays off right away, as we crit for the one-shot. This is easily the most mileage I've ever gotten out of Focus Energy, by the way. But in comes the real threat, Miltank. Does Ledian have enough? Oh my god, Ledian, that is insane damage, Jesus. Miltank goes for Stomp for a little bit under half, but it's not that scary because it can't flinch us. Priority Vacuum Wave is very nice here. It probably would have gone for Rollout if we were still quad weak to it, so it's really nice to get use out of our new typing. Miltank fruitlessly tries to heal, but it's just no match for Ledian. If anyone ever tries to tell you that I'm not a gamer, you show them this footage. This is a pretty foolproof answer to a very RNG heavy fight. Even Heracross can get flinch attacks by Stomp since it won't outspeed, so this win was huge for us, to the point where I can say that Ledian has filled her role as an early game crutch. Hell, we just soloed the first 3 gyms. What more could you want? Very impressive job, Ledian. Given that we've just learned the move Beat Up, it's as good a time as any to add some more members to the team. First, we meet Bill at Ecruteak City and then follow him back to his house in Goldenrod. Bill is a lover of many Pokemon, but he says he's recently found a stray Pokemon abandoned by its trainer in the Burn Tower. He hasn't been able to get through to this Pokemon, and he needs someone to take it off his hands. Radar the Eevee has lived most of her life in solitude. As such, she's become quite the hardened soul, refusing to let in any kind of friends or family. If pushed about her past, she lashes out, to the point where no one dares ask her about it anymore. This Pokemon definitely has a dark side, and is more than capable of lashing out should the wrong Pokemon get in the way. She's not exactly a team player now, but if we keep her as an Eevee until level 36, she'll be able to do some baton passing of her own, which might allow for more flexibility and take some of the weight off of Starlight's shoulders. We can only hope that the battles we face together can create some sort of bond with Radar as we do our best to welcome her to the team. But we're not even done there. On Route 38, we meet Hitman the Farfetch'd, a born markswoman. With a stick in her hands, she's a crit machine. But admittedly, she has a little bit of trouble focusing, and sometimes needs a little bit of help to stay on track. But when she's got an opponent in her sights, this Pokemon does not miss, and many a Pokemon have learned that the hard way. As long as she's holding her signature held item, the stick, one focus energy from Ledian is all she needs for a maximum critical hit chance. This means that she doesn't have to rely on the high crit moves like Air Cutter or Slash that often aren't quite as powerful as, say, Fly or Return. Basically, when comboed with Ledian, Farfetch'd doesn't have to choose between crit or raw damage. It's an unfortunate reality that crit rates cap out at 50% in Gen 4, but Hitman always says to never tell her the odds. Personally, I respect the confidence. We're definitely lucky to have this mad lass on the team. In fact, let's test that with this rival fight at the Burn Tower. I lead Ledian against his Ghastly and go for a focus energy while he goes for Confuse Ray. Then I go for Beat Up and look how little our tiny little punches do to a Ghastly. But we do crit enough of them to take it out. Guys, I think Focus Energy might secretly be the best move in the game. In comes Zubat and I break through the confusion and Baton Pass into max crit Farfetch'd who gets hit with a wing attack. Now Baton Pass does also pass over the confusion, but Hitman comes in clutch and breaks through, taking it out with a critical hit Slash. I did teach Return too, but I don't think Hitman loves me enough yet since we just caught her. Next is Magnemite, so I switch out into Precious, predicting the electric move, and take it out easily with a Dig, which I've taught by TM. Last is his Bayleaf, so I pivot back into Ledian and do the same thing. Set up a Focus Energy and carry it over to Hitman. Bayleaf sets up Reflect and gets a Poison Powder on us, so we are on a timer. At max crit odds, we have a 50-50 chance to end this fight no matter what move we use. We miss a crit on the first one, and it tries to stall us out with Synthesis. But not if Hitman has anything to say about it, as she finds the crit and ends the fight with an Aerial Ace. Nice. This was a nice little taste of the shenanigans we're going to be pulling for the mid to late game. Nice debut fight for Hitman too. Hey look, I found a shiny Pidgey. Hey little guy. Sorry, but we've already got our normal flyer, and you already had your turn. Alright, time to face Morty and his ghost types. I lead Ledian against his Ghastly and get off a Focus Energy while it goes for Lick for hardly any damage. I try a Beat Up, but even with a couple crits, we're just too weak to take down even a measly Ghastly. But I use the healing turn to Baton Pass into Hitman, who should be pretty good here since she's part normal. We're not very fast, so we do get outsped, but it just goes for Spite, so we take it out with a crit Aerial Ace. In comes Haunter, who also outspeeds and lands a Hypnosis and then starts going for Dream Eater. We wake up on turn 2, but don't get the crit. Unfortunately, he lands the Hypnosis again to put us right back to sleep, but Hitman wakes up on turn 2 again to take it out. Pretty lucky, but it also would have been nice to dodge a Hypnosis or get a crit. In comes his ace Gengar, who can only touch us with Sucker Punch, which fails if we don't attack. I can play around that with Swords Dance, which we also just learned, until eventually we take him out with an Aerial Ace, which does crit, but it doesn't matter at this point, our attack is maxed. And last is another Haunter, who also has Sucker Punch, but Hitman has just enough to survive and finish the fight with one last Aerial Ace. Good work, buddy. Bit of a wacky fight, but Hitman proved her value. We can definitely see a turning point here with Ledian's damage output. And that's what we expected. I'm excited to see just how the rest of the run goes. After that, I grabbed the TM for Drain Punch at the Miltank farm. A pretty great move that we now get Stab and the Technician boost from. It's also available via Infinite TM at the Goldenrod Lottery, but up until now, all 4 of our move slots have been spoken for. Next, we fight the Fighting type Gym Leader Chuck, who's got some pretty scary fully evolved Pokemon like this Primeape. We're no longer weak to Rock Slide, so it goes for the equally annoying Double Team. But may I introduce you to Mind Reader and our newly evolved X the Kingler, who we kept unevolved until level 31 so he would learn Guillotine before this level cap. Primeape goes for another Double Team, but guys, he must not know about the Mind Reader Baton Pass Ledian tech. Guillotine hits with Mind Reader through the evasion boost for the one-hit KO. In comes Poliwrath, so I switch back into Ledian, who tanks it pretty well thanks to her natural special defense. I go for another Mind Reader as it lands a Body Slam, but Starlight has just enough to hang on. Again, I Baton Pass back into X, who easily tanks another Body Slam. I go for the fully accurate Guillotine again, and there's just nothing Chuck can do. Wow, that was really cool to see in action. Focus Energy Farfetch was a little flimsy because 100% crit chance doesn't exist in Gen 4, but this strat is a serious threat. X can basically delete any Pokemon we don't like so long as Ledian is bulky enough to pass the Mind Reader onto him. It's just really nice to see things come together like this. On our way back to mainland, I fish up the last member of our team, Zero, the Shelder. Out of this ragtag team of misfits that has made up our Pokemon team so far, Zero kinda sticks out as an actually good Pokemon. Born into the famous Cloyster lineage, Zero has always been told that a physical tank is all she'll ever need to be. But Zero just isn't that kind of girl. What kind of Pokemon wants to get punched in the face? Zero dreams of a high-flying, electrifying, offensive fighting style, the way ice types are meant to be. But when she told her family about her dreams, they laughed in her face and told her to stay in her lane. There's no Shell Smash in Gen 4, and with that quiet nature, she'll never have the speed to make it in the big leagues. But when Zero heard of a Ledian roaming the nation, rumored to have the ability to turn defense into offense, her interest was piqued. And I have to say, when I take a look at this Pokemon's base stats, it got me excited too. Is this a match made in heaven, or some crazy pipe dream? Only one way to find out. Welcome to the team, Zero. I'll spare you the details of the mundane rocket hideout and move on to the Ice-type gym leader, Price. The rest of our team doesn't fare particularly well in this fight, so I figure I'd try slapping the Drain Punch TM on Starlight to see how she does. We can take the Ice-type attacks pretty well thanks to our special bulk, coupled with the fact that we're no longer weak to Ice, and start setting up with our new move, Bulk Up. But our attack is so low that even at +3 attack, we can't take out a weakened Seal without chip damage from Hail. Now, we're not in any danger here since Drain Punch does heal us for half the damage we're doing, enough to get us through the rest of the fight. I just want to reiterate how being a physical attacker at this point in the game and onward just really isn't an option. We have to get all the way to +5 just to take out some mediocre ice types, and our opponents will only get stronger from here on. I know that we have an attack hindering nature, and I could have leaned into a special moveset too, but there aren't a lot of great special based fighting moves aside from Vacuum Wave or a way to buff our special attack that makes sense for Ledian. We've got enough firepower to make it through this gym fight, but it's safe to say that we'll be leaning on the support side of things from here on. It was still fun to see the Technician boosted Stab Drain Punch, even if it was a bit underwhelming. Next up is Jasmine. Unlike Price's frail ice types, no way is Ledian going to be able to break these ironclad steel types. But she can get off a few bulk ups on her lead Magnemite, especially when she's holding a Cherry Berry to cure its first Thunder Wave. Baton passing stats to a team member is probably the most basic use of Baton Pass, but it's a damn good one. Pretty much any one of our party members could see us through this fight, but I've got to give this one to Precious the Onix. She comes in and takes out the Magnemite with a +3 quad effective dig. But in comes her age-old enemy, the one who put her out of the ring in the first place, Steelix. There's a lot of history in this matchup, but our old girl has something to prove today. Steelix goes for a super effective Iron Tail, but Precious is a step quicker and burrows under the ground to avoid it. Next turn, she emerges to land a solid blow from down under for just under half health, while Steelix lands an Iron Tail this time, but with Starlight's help to patch our defense, Onix can shrug it off. Again, Onix outspeeds and burrows underground to get off another dig on the following turn, but it's not quite enough and Steelix hangs on. It heals some of its health back with a Citrus Berry, which ends up being its downfall as this puts it out of healing range. Steelix, in a state of panic, throws and goes for the Sandstorm, giving Precious the opening she's been looking for, burrowing underground one more time and giving this glorified piece of scrap metal an uppercut to the jaw, taking it out. The final Magnemite is no threat, getting Precious the Onix a much-deserved win. All the young guns with their fancy new evolutions could learn a thing or two from her. Good job, you old bird. You still got it. Perhaps inspired by the tenacity of the past generation, our youngest team member, Radar, finally comes around, learning Baton Pass at level 36 and evolving into an Umbreon. Glad to finally have you on board, Radar. Following that, we've got a rival fight in the tunnels of Goldenrod City. I lead Ledian against his Golbat and get off a bulk up while we tank a quad effective Air Cutter. That's all we can do with Ledian, so I Baton Pass and Radar's Pokeball starts to tremble within my bag. She's clearly got some unfinished business with our rival, and it suddenly hits me that this is the trainer that abandoned her so long ago. This is her moment, and I send her out in her newly evolved form. It's payback time. A +1 payback is enough to one-shot the Golbat. In comes Meganium, who gets off a Reflect while we chip away with a Bite and another payback. It goes for Poison Powder, but Radar gets the dodge, while continuing to gradually whittle it down with payback. It locks itself into Petal Dance, but we've got the special bulk to take a few of those. Eventually, Umbreon wins the war of attrition, bringing in Sneasel. Reflect is still up, so payback doesn't do too much, but neither do Sneasel's quick attacks. Once the Reflect wears off, we can take it out with another payback and a quick attack of our own. After that is Magnemite. We land a Bite, and it goes for Thunder Wave to paralyze it, which triggers our Synchronize ability to paralyze Magnemite as well. We get paralyzed next turn, and things are looking dire for Radar, but she gets it together and takes it out with a payback. Last is Haunter, who goes for Curse. Does Radar have enough to finish this fight? Yes, she does, breaking through the paralysis to take it down. Radar is seething with rage, and I see tears in her eyes. Silver is at a loss for words and can't comprehend why we beat him. This was an emotional win for our little Umbreon, and I'm glad Ledian and I were able to get her through this moment. To cap off the Team Rocket padding, we've got a date with Archer at the top of the radio tower. I lead with Ledian to get off a bulk up, while his lead Houndour goes for Fire Fang. With +1 defense, we hang on, and I decided to try our luck with Drain Punch, and surprisingly, it's enough to take it out. In comes his ace Houndoom, and I gotta say, there is one stat that's really holding up into the late game, our speed. I did not expect to outspeed this Houndoom, but hey, I'll take it. Drain Punch does solid damage, and we've got just enough bulk to hang on from another Fire Fang, so one last Drain Punch can take it out. In comes Coughing, and I Baton Pass into Hitman to finish things off. I've ditched Focus Energy at this point, so we don't crit, but this is our last major fight until we reach Blackthorn City, where I can relearn moves, which should be really helpful. So far, I've had to be really careful when thinking about which moves I want to get rid of. Anyway, we get the win, putting an end to Team Rocket for 3 more generations. Good work. Alright, we've become a little bit too reliant on basic bulk up strats, so it's time to break out some new toys against Claire. I lead Hitman against her lead Gyarados to absorb the attack drop from Intimidate and a Bite before getting off a slow U-turn into Starlight. On the following turn, I go for Power Trick, swapping our attack and defense while Gyarados hits a Dragon Rage. Then, I Baton Pass the stat swap into Zero, who has now evolved into a Cloyster. If you've forgotten what Cloyster's base stats look like, here you go. Swapping attack and defense on Ledian has no real use, but passing it on to our friend Zero here effectively gives us an attack stat of 180. What that means is that we can absorb a Dragon Rage from Gyarados before using Avalanche, a move that becomes 120 base power when we move second, which is easily enough to take Gyarados down. She sends in her 2 Dragonairs next, both of whom outspeed Zero, but the priority move Ice Shard overrides this, and despite its weak base power of 40, our now colossal attack stat means that we have enough attack to take both of these Pokemon down. Last is her ace Kingdra, a pretty serious threat with not a lot of good answers, and unfortunately, I need to let Zero go down here. But this was an awesome debut fight for her. I bring Ledian back in for free, and now we get an opportunity to use one of her old tricks, getting off a Light Screen to tank Kingdra's strong special attacks. We dodge a Hydro Pump, but that wasn't necessary. Next, Starlight gets off a Mind Reader, and I think you can see where this is going. We can now Baton Pass into our old friend X, who isn't fast enough to outspeed or very specially defensive. Without Ledian's Light Screen, X would not be able to tank a Hydro Pump plus Dragon Pulse needed to finish this fight. But with Mind Reader in play too, Starlight has lined this fight up perfectly so that all X has to do is click Guillotine for a pretty guaranteed win against a fight that doesn't really have a lot of true counters. I'll note that I could have given Kingler a Choice Scarf and we would have been able to outspeed Kingdra, and I wouldn't have had to go through all the rigmarole of setting up Light Screen. But my cheapskate mom still hasn't realized that no amount of money will bring Dad back, so she still hasn't bought me a Choice Scarf. Regardless, the 8th badge is ours despite our mother's neglect. Now it's time to fight the 5 Kimono girls, and as I mentioned in my Pidgey video, it's really nice to have a fast pivot like Ledian who can lead against this diverse set of opponents that no Pokemon can really sweep, and pivot into whatever Pokemon suits best for that situation. Light Screen is also great here because 4 out of 5 evolutions are special attackers. Most of our stats have fallen way off at this point, but like I said before, our speed is still great. Shockingly, we even outspeed the Jolteon. That really surprised me. I guess I'm really glad we got a timid nature in the end, since speed is pretty much all we need now. Again, just a really solid series of fights, and I love how our team is coming together. Next up, we've got our final rival fight at Victory Road. Of course, we lead Ledian against his Sneasel and get off a bulk up while it lands an Icy Wind which does a bit of damage and lowers our speed. I then get off a Power Trick while taking a bit more chip from a couple feint attacks before baton passing into Radar the Umbreon. Radar is another Pokemon who loves having her attack and defense swapped. It's always been a dream of mine to have an offensive Umbreon, and Starlight is making everyone's dreams come true. The speed drop from Sneasel's Icy Wind also powers up Radar's bread and butter move, Payback, which doubles in power when the user moves second. Basically, all of this means that Radar is able to one-shot Sneasel despite it resisting us, but in comes the sturdier Magneton who gets off a Supersonic. Radar breaks through, but a Payback is not enough to take it out. This means that Magneton can get off a Spark, which unfortunately paralyzes. But Radar's determination allows her to break through the Para and Confusion to finish it off. The rest of this fight is basically a war of attrition, breaking through paralysis and getting off some extremely powerful paybacks. The Reflect from Meganium delays the inevitable, but most of Silver's Pokemon are special attackers and Umbreon still has the natural special defense and HP to retain her bulk. There's just not a lot that Silver can do here except watch helplessly as the one Pokemon he once abandoned takes out his ultimate team of the strongest Pokemon he could muster. Our little Umbreon that could has just punched our ticket to the Pokemon League. Well, here we are. I'm shocked we've made it all the way to the league without the slightest hint of adversity. Seriously, we've had an answer for every single fight in the game, no matter how unorthodox that strat may be. I haven't really addressed this so far, but this team is pretty abysmal on paper. All my Pokemon are either garbage stat-wise or are cursed with a garbage moveset, or both. But somehow it's worked so far. But the Elite Four and Champion will probably have something to say about that. These are going to be the toughest fights yet. But I have this Ledian, and she's been the glue that's held this ragtag team of misfits together. I don't know how she's done it, but with Starlight at the helm, there's nothing we can't do. Our attack and defense are hilariously low, but our speed and special defense are pretty wild, and that's been all we've needed. The moves I'm sticking with here are Bulk Up and Power Trick, which are always useful to Baton Pass because, yeah, and Mind Reader for Kingler's Guillotine. I could have grabbed Focus Energy, but Farfetch has kind of fallen off in the mid-game, and Hitman can at least benefit from Bulk Up as well. Side note that my mom still hasn't bought me a Choice Scarf, so let's hope Kingler is fast enough to chop off the heads that he's gonna need to. This Ledian has been battling in ways that I never thought possible, and I'm really excited to see if she can take us all the way. Let's do this. First up is the Psychic-type Master Will. I send out Ledian against his Johto and get off a Power Trick while it goes for Psychic, which does a surprising amount of damage. I have no choice but to Baton Pass into Radar. Luckily, Power Trick Umbreon is pretty much custom built to handle this fight. A buffed up super effective Payback is enough to one-shot most of his Pokemon, and we really don't care about sacrificing our defense because most of his Psychic types are physical. The Slowbro is a little bit annoying because we can't one-shot it and it annoyingly sets up Curse to boost its defense. Focus Energy would have been nice here, but there's not much Slowbro can really do to us. Eventually, we win the War of Attrition and take it down and tank the Aerial Ace from his last Pokemon, Johto, to get off one last Payback, getting us a pretty straightforward win. Second is Koga and his Poison types. He leads with Ariados against Ledian, and I get off a quick Bulk Up before he goes for Spiderweb, which prevents us from switching out. But it does not counter Baton Pass. It just means the incoming Pokemon still can't switch. Yeah, I can definitely see why Baton Pass is banned in competitive play. Anyway, Starlight gets off a Power Trick before taking some damage from Poison Jab, but again, Starlight has done her job. We Baton Pass into none other than Precious the Onyx. who takes minimal damage from the incoming poison jab. At this point, our attack is through the roof and Precious is ready to go. Earthquake is enough to take out Ariados in a single hit. Forretress comes in, and I hard read the Protect and get off a Rock Polish to outspeed some of Koga's Pokemon in the back. Then, we dust him with the classic Occaberry Natural Gift maneuver, which gives us a one-time quad-effective fire attack which is easily enough to take it out. In comes Venomoth, who would have outsped without Rock Polish, but Onix is just too quick and leaves it in the dust with another Earthquake, and the incoming Muck meets the exact same fate. Last is his ace, Crobat. No evolution and no stab rock move over 50 base power in Gen 4 for Onix? No problem, as we hit the rock throw and cap off another surprisingly clean fight. This girl still got it. Next up is Bruno, who I usually make fun of, but our only Pokemon that resists fighting is a Ledian, so this is actually a little sketchy. I lead Ledian and start getting off some bulk ups while his lead Hitmontop wastes time going for Dig. My goal is to baton pass these over into Farfetch'd. She can boost her own attack with Swords Dance, but I actually need the defense boost because Farfetch'd can't outspeed some of Bruno's Pokemon, nor can it take the hits necessary to back up that lack of speed. Farfetch'd is just a pretty poor Pokemon even with a stick, and it's definitely a Pokemon I'll need to cover in a video one day. But for now, Hitman is all we've got. On the turn we switch in, Hitmontop is underground, so I set up a Swords Dance to max out our attack. Once Hitmontop comes back up, I go for a turn and take it out. This brings in Hitmonchan, who is faster than us and has the super effective Iron Fist boosted Ice Punch, which would easily take us out, but with Ledian's defense boost from Bulk Up, it's no problem for our little Hitman, and we take it out with Return. In comes Onix, who we chip down to half health, and then hits us with a super effective Rock Slide. Luckily, Hitman finds the high roll to take the Rock Snake down, bringing in his ace, Machamp. Luckily, we can outspeed this thing and take it out with another critical hit return, and last is Hitmonlee. Imagine having to rely on moves like Focus Energy for crits. It's probably the worst move in the game. With one last swing of her stick, Hitman finishes the fight with one last crit return. It would have been cooler if any of those crits mattered, but Farfetch'd really did need a lot of help to carry in a late game fight. But Hitman got it done, and we're proud of her. On to Karen. So this is a fight that we don't really have a clear answer for. And that's kind of a problem as Ledian isn't tanky enough to be swapped in and out multiple times per battle. We lead with her against this Umbreon who is always annoying, but Starlight is actually a great counter with Mind Reader plus Baton Pass into X, who is able to get a fully accurate Guillotine despite the double teams. This brings in Vileplume, and I switch back into Ledian on the Petal Dance, and she tanks it relatively well despite a critical hit. I decide to use Mind Reader again as Petal Dance expires, and the Vileplume therefore becomes confused. I pivot back into Kingler and the Vileplume hits itself in confusion. I'm pretty confident it would have gone for Stun Spore and X is holding a Cherry Berry anyway. But regardless, we do get off our inevitable Guillotine for X's second kill of the fight. In comes Gengar, and I pivot back into Starlight to absorb the Focus Blast. I get off a Power Trick and then a Bulk Up while it wastes turns going for Spite. We get hit with Focus Blast, and I'm a little scared since most of my team is weak to fighting, but I'm hoping that Radar can be my answer here. Luckily, the Gengar continues to use Spite instead of going for big damage with Focus Blast, and Radar sees the opening and takes out this threat with a payback. But in comes Houndoom, another serious threat. It sets up a nasty plot and I go for payback again for over half health. But its Citrus Berry makes it a questionable 2-hit KO. On the next turn, it goes for another nasty plot. At this point, if Radar can't finish this fight, it's over, because Houndoom outspeeds and can one-shot the rest of my team. I go for payback, but it's not quite enough. Houndoom survives on 1 HP. Karen heals, but Umbreon lets out the payback of her life and takes it down with a critical hit. Nice job. And last is Murkrow, who's not really a threat. I hit a payback that doesn't quite one-shot, so we get Whirlwinded into Zero, who can finish it off with an Ice Shard, earning us a date with Champion Lance. With one fight left, we step forward with Ledian at the helm. Finally, the Champion Lance. I lead with Hitman to absorb the Intimidate from his lead Gyarados and get off a slow U-turn to switch into Starlight. That works too. Great job, buddy. I send Starlight into the empty field to do her thing one last time. But now, this time, she's got one last trick up her sleeve. Reflect. It was about the screens all along. With this, we can buy ourselves the turns we need, because without it, a waterfall would have knocked us into the red. But now we've got time to get off a bulk up, while another waterfall knocks us into our citrus berry range. We needed to boost our defense a little more before we power trick, because now our attack becomes our defense, so we're becoming a little bit more frail when Gyarados hits another waterfall. But our little Ledian hangs on. Starlight has done her job, but this was never her fight. With everything on the line, we turn to Zero the Cloyster, who still has something to prove. With the Reflect still up, she tanks the resisted waterfall pretty well, but because of her quiet nature, Zero is pretty slow and gets hit with a Dragon Pulse, which does a lot more. But she hangs in there and fires off an Avalanche to take out this monster of a Pokemon. But there's still a lot of fight left. Can Zero hang in there? Lance sends out Aerodactyl, who packs some super effective rock moves. But Zero is one step ahead with Priority Ice Shard, which, with Power Trick, is enough to take it out. Now that there's blood in the water, Zero is a killing machine, destroying all 3 of Lance's pseudo-legendary Dragonites, who are completely helpless to the power of Power Trick Cloyster. But it's not over yet. Out comes his last Pokemon, Charizard. Its fire typing means that Ice Shard won't be enough for even a 2-shot. It's also faster, and can do some serious damage with the special move Air Slash, which also has a 30% chance to flinch. I have to go for Avalanche, but I need Zero to dodge the flinch. Zero, it's your moment. Reach out and take it. That works too. We get the 5% dodge chance and let off the Avalanche of our lives. But it's still not enough. I figure it might be in the range of Ice Shard now, but we'll never know, because Zero lands us the title with a clutch critical hit, crowning this ragtag team of misfit Pokemon champions of the Johto League. And that is how I would fix Ledian in Pokemon HeartGold and SoulSilver. Just kidding, it isn't. This has been one of the wildest runs I've ever done, and it would be a travesty not to give Ledian and the rest of this team a shot in the ultimate battle against Red on Mount Silver. This Red fight needs no introduction, but I'll give it one anyway. His Pokemon are level 80s, which are no place for a Pokemon like Ledian, whose stats fell off by like level 20, and 5 other mid to low tier Pokemon. He's got 6 Pokemon who can hit like a truck, so we're gonna have to get a little more creative with our strategies. But let's give it a shot. Leading into the ultimate fight, Red sends out Pikachu, his highest level and arguably the largest threat on his team. I send out Hitman of all Pokemon, because by this point, my mom has decided I'm worthy enough for a Choice Scarf, which I've now given to Hitman in place of her trusty stick. The +1 speed boost means that Hitman can outspeed and hit a knockoff, which actually crits anyway. But moreover, it knocks off Pikachu's Light Ball, which doubles its attack and special attack. This is Hitman's one job in this fight, and she has executed it perfectly. With one final salute, she falls to a super effective Volt Tackle. Into the empty field, I send out Starlight. The one stat of hers that has not fallen off, even at level 85, is her speed, as she still gets the outspeed on the wily electric rodent and gets off a bulk up before tanking a Volt Tackle for just over half health with the chip damage from Hail, knocking Starlight into her Citrus Berry range, bringing her back to about 2/3 HP. Without Hitman knocking off Pikachu's Light Ball, that Volt Tackle would have decimated Starlight in a single hit. By this point, Pikachu's recoil damage from Volt Tackle has knocked it into healing range, so Ledian can get off another bulk up while Red uses a full restore. Now I have to go for Power Trick to swap my attack and defense, meaning that the incoming Volt Tackle will do a little bit more, but our girl Starlight has just enough grit to hang on. Again, Starlight has done her job. With one final baton pass, we leave it in the hands of the rest of our team. To carry the torch, I send out Radar the Umbreon, who is much bulkier and can tank a Volt Tackle for minimal damage. Radar is holding the leftovers in this fight, which we picked up in the post-game, to negate the chip damage from Hail, because Radar is gonna need to tank a fair amount of hits. Since Radar is so slow, she has to eat another Volt Tackle, which is actually a good thing, because it won't damage the substitute we set up immediately after. And then, with the Power Swap boost from Ledian and +2 attack from Bulk Up, a single quick attack can finish off Red's lead Pokemon. This brings in Blastoise, who sees the kill with a super effective Focus Blast. This Pokemon actually outspeeds us, but that's actually a good thing, because our substitute eats the incoming Focus Blast, and Raider can land a payback with all her might, which is enough to take down the tanky turtle. Next out is Venusaur, and I figure Raider has the special bulk to live whatever this thing has in store, but it actually goes for Sleep Powder, which I forgot it had. I have no choice but to leave it in Raidar's hands and pray for the 2-turn wake up. Venusaur goes for Sludge Bomb, and we have just enough to hang on, and Raider comes through, waking up on turn 2, to get off her secret weapon, a Baton Pass of her own, which means that all the buffs from Ledian are still intact. With everything on the line, we again turn to Zero the Cloyster, who also gets outsped by Venusaur, and would get one-shot by a grass move if not for one of her classic super effective Ice Shards, which is enough to get the one-shot. Since Zero is part Ice type, she's not going to take hail damage in this fight, but in comes Charizard, a monstrous special attacker who can hit Zero where it really hurts. With a priority Ice Shard, we don't have to worry about the 30% flinch from Air Slash, but it won't be able to one-shot, so we do still have to tank one for a lot of damage, bringing us down to just 60 HP. But with another Ice Shard, we can finish this thing off, while healing a bit of HP from the Shell Bell we're holding. In comes Lapras, another special attacker, but one we can outspeed and get off a Poison Jab, a move that we picked up via TM from Gym Leader Janine for some neutral coverage. It does solid damage, but not enough to kill. But since Lapras has so much HP, the Shell Bell heals us by a decent amount, just barely enough to survive the incoming Psychic on just 8 health. The poison from our Poison Jab brings Lapras into healing range, so we get the opportunity to get off a couple more Poison Jabs for a bit more Shell Bell recovery before taking it out. Red sends in his last Pokemon, Snorlax, another extremely bulky Pokemon. But again, one we can outspeed and get off another Poison Jab. It doesn't do enough, but the Shell Bell brings Zero to 79 HP. Will that be enough to survive? Snorlax goes for the special move Shadow Ball to target our weak special defense. But Zero wears it like a champ and can take us home with one final +2 Power Tricked Poison Jab to win us the run. And that is how I would fix Ledian in Pokemon HeartGold and SoulSilver. Wow, what a fun run that was. I love the runs that allow me to play the game in a way I never have before. This one was super fun to plan out the entire team because Ledian's support opened up so much potential. The 5 Pokemon that I ended up using were just the Pokemon that I could see being some of the most improved. If we comboed our new and improved Ledian with actual top tier Pokemon like Gyarados or something, I imagine this would be really busted. Feel free to leave comments on which Pokemon you think would benefit most from the buffs that we gave Ledian. Speaking of, Ledian herself was amazing, and did pretty much everything I wanted her to do. Technician was enough of a power boost to push us through the first 3 gyms, and the transition to a support mon was pretty seamless. I thought that we would struggle with only 4 move slots before reaching the move relearner in Blackthorn City, but Ledian had a trick up her sleeve for every single fight. I'm really proud of her. The fights were really tricky in the late game, as we really had to start relying off of Starlight's bulk, or lack thereof, because Ledian is so physically frail, but she always had just enough to get the job done. Let me know your thoughts on how I handled Ledian down below. I know support Pokemon won't always be the sexy setup sweepers that make for a good YouTube video, but not every Pokemon should be an attacker, and like I said earlier, I have a lot of fun building around certain Pokemon to make them shine, and this run pushed my team building skills to the absolute limit. Baton passing is by no means an optimal in-game strategy, but it was so fun to use these below average Pokemon in super unorthodox ways. Seriously, come on. How many of you thought we could make Vanilla Onyx work as well as she did? And those guillotine strats with Kingler were hype as hell. So yeah, either this run or my Skitty run has been my favorite so far, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. How would you fix Ledian? Is there another Pokemon you'd like to see covered in the future? In these last couple videos, I've covered some of my most highly requested Pokemon. So next time, we're going to be mixing it up with a Pokemon that almost nobody has requested, but one I think will be really fun. It's one of the very few Pokemon that received a Gen 4 evolution that wasn't quite enough to save it. Think you know who it is? Let me know down below. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you next time.